This is my M1 Pro MacBook and it made every single video on this channel, even this one. Yes, this is my mic, this is the Blue Snowball. It survived through everything and it was probably the best purchase I've ever made. So what's the problem? Well, when I bought this, I got the base config with 16 gigs of RAM and half a terabyte of storage, which at the time made sense. I wasn't even planning to edit, I didn't even have this channel, but I think it's coming back to bite me because I'm starting to feel like I need an upgrade. At first, when Apple announced the M1 chips, it felt like I discovered the holy grail. I could do basic work, even basic editing, and the fans wouldn't even kick in. This was a massive upgrade over this old Windows laptop that I used to have. Just watching YouTube made it sound like a jet engine. So understandably, the M1 felt illegal and it felt like I would never have to upgrade. Until now. And this is my MacBook M5 Pro with double the storage, triple the RAM, and a right hook to my wallet. You see, when you do buy a MacBook, there's no turning back. Once you buy this, you cannot upgrade the RAM or storage, and I completely fell for that. So I was editing a video the other day and I started layering a bunch of stuff and I noticed how slow the scrubbing was even at a quarter resolution, and then I look at my RAM usage and I sent a screenshot to my friend in disbelief because Premiere Pro alone was using 30 gigabytes of RAM and then another 10 gigabytes was used by Lightroom. I only have 16 gigs in total, so what on earth is going on? Apparently over 35 gigabytes was in swap, meaning that the MacBook is using the storage as temporary RAM, which for one is not ideal for the SSD, and for two, it kind of explains why the whole system just felt so sluggish. And again, ever since the M1, there was just no incentive to upgrade. The M2 and the M3 and even the M4 was a lot quicker, but I don't really care. I never really had a problem with exporting because if I spend a week on a video scripting, filming, editing, being slightly handicapped, it didn't really matter if it took 20 minutes or 10 minutes to export. Once I click export, I am done for the day. I always felt some kind of slowdowns, but I just did not want to spend this much on a MacBook. So this project was basically the tipping point where I was like, okay, you got me. I was like, screw the 16 gigabytes, screw the 24, 36, screw all the older MacBooks, just give me 48 gigabytes so I never have to look at another MacBook ever again. Until a new one comes out and then I feel like I'm missing out again. It's a never-ending cycle. And why not Windows, you may ask? Well, because I don't want to deal with all this crap that I used to deal with, like the fan speeds, the constant updates and the drivers and the notifications. And maybe they have been improved because I have been looking at some new laptops and you know what? The Blade 14 actually looks pretty good. But I just don't have a good reason to switch back because everything works perfectly fine on this MacBook and I don't even play games, so give me one good reason. So Apple kept dangling the M5 Pro in my face until I was like, fine, I guess I'll upgrade. But this time, instead of getting a 16-inch in silver, I'm gonna go for a 14-inch in black. And you know what they say, once you go black, you can never go back. Man, this one in black is so nice. Everyone keeps saying just go for the 16-inch, but traveling with this is a bit annoying because it takes up like the entire backpack. And this one shaves off a lot of weight and I like it. Now with gaming, the only good game that's compatible with my Mac is Cyberpunk, but I never really played it. You wanna know why? Because I had no freaking storage on it. So one of the most annoying things about macOS is the storage, because look, this storage keeps filling up so quickly, and if I open this menu, this doesn't even make sense because the numbers don't even add up. So for like the last year or so, I've been using this app called Disk Space Analyzer and I genuinely like it so much that I contacted them and now they're sponsoring the video. Basically, Disk Space Analyzer makes it easier to see what's actually eating your storage. For example, if I click on my username, there's 78 gigabytes of hidden items, and I couldn't see that properly in the normal macOS storage menu. The folder view makes it easy to narrow down where all the junk is coming from, and if I click the biggest file, it turns out that this video was taking up 37 gigabytes. There's also this circular diagram which I really like because in like 2 seconds I can tell that my desktop is the clear problem, but also all of this hidden stuff in grey, like cache. You have universal search, you can preview files before deleting them, or just show them in Finder. You can export the scan results, and you can even scan external drives. That is so useful to me. So check the links down below because you can download it for free and get a 2-day free trial, and you don't need to make any accounts or give any credit card information. So yeah, really cool. And let's get back to the video. So it was time to test Cyberpunk, and let me just tell you, I was kind of blown away. So on the M1 Pro, to get any playable performance, I had to play on 1080p with like a bunch of upscaling. And even then, I was only getting like 50 FPS, which sounds more than fine, but I don't know if this is a Cyberpunk problem or a Mac problem or a me problem, but there is so much input lag, like there is so much delay, and it doesn't feel as responsive as a Windows machine. There is also this bug where the game would just bug out and freeze the camera or just walk by itself. I mean, now it's just a complete mess. Like I don't know what's going on. Like it's completely broken. And then I tried the same thing with the M5 Pro, and you know, I expected a lot more FPS, but it was literally double, over double. It was like over 100 FPS. But you know what? I could still feel this weird input lag. Like I don't know what it is. But despite that, doubling the performance felt absolutely crazy. Especially because this is a smaller MacBook, so I can carry it around and play Cyberpunk on a plane if I want to. Also, since the M3 processors, you can enable hardware ray tracing on Cyberpunk, which enabling that gave me like 20 FPS, which isn't a really good idea, especially how loud the fans actually get. Also, if I'm not mistaken, the GPU inside the M5 Pro is roughly an RTX 5060 level, which is not crazy or anything, but at this point we should really be getting some more games on macOS. And now let's focus on editing for a little bit, because I did not spend all of this money just to play games. Do you remember that sluggish project that I was talking about? Well, opening that project on the M5 Pro was a delight, because even at full resolution I could easily fly through the entire timeline, and it was so peaceful. And although it was using a healthy chunk of RAM, there was also so much RAM just left over. And it's just something I'm not gonna have to worry about, and this is what I paid for the peace of mind. And just for fun, I was like, let's see how much quicker the export times will be. And at first, I got really excited because the old MacBook said almost 10 minutes, whereas the new one said like 5 minutes. But they were both misleading, because the M1 took like 19 minutes and the M5 took 10 minutes, which is basically double, which I still don't care about. But what I did care about is that entire time, that old 16-inch was fairly quiet. You could barely hear it, despite the fact that it was rendering a video and the fan speed was on 50%. That is like crazy. And the new 14-inch had the fan slightly higher at 60%, but it was noticeably louder, which is a real downside of downsizing. But the thing is, I already knew that. Like, the 14-inch has less room to breathe, it has a smaller heatsink, smaller fans, but damn, I didn't realize how good 16 inches was. Another thing that I noticed is that during the rendering, both MacBooks had their GPUs absolutely slam dunked with 100% GPU usage, which got me thinking. This entire time, I just assumed that the Max chip would be completely useless, because after all of these YouTubers are saying, you don't need a Max chip, look, this is the most simple timeline. It takes the same amount of time. But clearly, looking at this project, I would have clearly benefited from that beefier GPU on the Max chip. But let's just relax a little bit, because I am not gonna spend 5 grand on this MacBook, okay? As long as tomorrow I don't start rendering Avatar 4 or Toy Story 6, I should be fine. Also, the Max chip on a 14-inch would be an absolute volcano. And at that point, you should just buy a Mac Studio or something, which is what I could have done, but I noticed that Premiere Pro was taking quite a while to open on my M1 Pro, so I thought, you know, that's just the M1 Pro, but it took a whole like 10 seconds, so I did the same thing on my M5 Pro, expecting like 2 seconds, and it took basically the same amount of time. And I think the thing is, the M1 Pro is already so quick. It opens everything basically instantly. So now the only limitation these days is just RAM. If you run out of RAM, that's what's gonna make your system feel sluggish. And I know some of you are gonna be like, oh, you're so stupid, you should have waited for the M6 Pro, that's coming out pretty soon, with OLED screens and touch screens, and you know what? Maybe they will have those screens. But I like to be a little bit more optimistic, and instead of thinking, oh, if I just waited, I could have had something better, because there always will be something better, I like to think, okay, it's been 5 years, the M5 Pro is going to be a huge jump, and even if the M6 Pro is another big jump, that's good, because in the future, I actually have something to look forward to, because I don't want to wait another 10 years for something interesting to come out. And honestly, I don't really think I care about the OLED touchscreens. Like, I'm grateful for the screen, I'm grateful for these speakers, for the amazing trackpad, the fingerprint scanner, great battery, all metal design. This is like all that I could possibly need. And okay, enough praise, let's balance it out with some criticism. Because in those 5 years, design-wise, I don't think anything has changed. These MacBooks are basically identical, apart from the color. One of them is black. I don't think the speakers have changed, and the screen is brighter, but you can just download this app on your old MacBook, and that can extend the brightness beyond the limits because Apple just had it locked for some reason. This stupid notch is still a thing, and usually I don't mind notches, but this is a bigger problem on the 14-inch because stuff barely fits on the menu bar. So in the end, was this upgrade worth it? Yes and no. It will make my most difficult projects slightly better, but I genuinely think that back in the day, if I just went for the M1 Max with 64 gigs and 2 terabytes of storage, I would still be fine. So the M1 wasn't the problem, the configuration was the problem. That RAM and storage back in the day was such a mistake. And you can literally find the M1 Max for like a whole 1,000 less than the M5 Pro. And because the design hasn't changed a bit, and the fact that the M1 Max has so many GPU cores, which basically balances out with the M5 Pro, there is no good reason to get the M5 Pro unless you desperately need that extra CPU performance, which is basically double. But in my case, I wasn't gonna upgrade from a 5-year-old laptop to a 5-year-old laptop. In my head, that makes absolutely no sense. It's like breaking up with your girlfriend and then going for her sister. For me, the real upgrade was the RAM and storage, not really the M5, even though it does help. So financially, I don't think this was the best upgrade, but for me, it made the most sense. Not because the M1 was bad, but because I just didn't think about the future. So it's time to retire this massive M1 Pro. It's done a good job. And welcome M5 Pro. Anyway, end of my yap. Peace out.